Happy New Year and time for sound design. In today's video, I'm going to create an instrument by sampling the self-oscillating feedback of a delay. So what do I mean with that? Let's go to the beginning and I'll explain how a basic delay works. So I created this little diagram and there's an input signal. Then there is a delay line. So that is basically the wet part of the effect. And typically you have two parameters for that, which is the delay time, which can be like an 8th, a 16th if it's synced to a tempo, or it is usually measured in milliseconds. And then there's the feedback gain, and that's the number of repeats, or sometimes also called intensity. So that means for how long, how many repeats do you have for the delay. And this is the wet signal, the delayed signal, and that is mixed in with the original signal, as you can see at the bottom, from the input straight to the delay mix. And the delay mix is typically called dry wet or something like blend. And that's how you create a delay effect. If you now crank up the feedback gain or the amount of feedback, so the number of repeats, depending on the type of delay, you can get into self-oscillation. So what that means is that you create this kind of wild constant tone because the output signal of the wet signal is fed back into the delay line and is delayed again. So when you create this wild self-oscillating tone, that's a perfect tone to sample and create an instrument from. So that is the idea of this video. And I'm going to use some hardware to create this wild delay effect. And as you can see on the desk next to me, I have the drum root impact as a sound source. I'm not going to create a drum pattern and play that, but I'm going to trigger individual notes and sounds from this drum machine. Of course, you can use a synthesizer for this or any kind of other sound source. The drum root is then going into two pedals. The first one is the particle from Red Panda, which is a pitch shifting and delay pedal, but I'm going to use the pitch shifting part just to break up and mess up the sound of the drum root. And then I'm going to use the Echostation from Universal Audio for the delay. And I'm going to use the first mode. It's an emulation of an analog delay. And the middle knob at the top is the feedback control, and I'm going to crank that up to get into the self-oscillation. So that was for the first experiment. For the second experiment, I have the Boss SP303 here, which has several delay effects as well. So I'm going to use that later on. But let's get started with the drum root through the particle and the Echostation and create some different sounds with that. And I will record it into Ableton. So yeah, especially in the end, you hear the sound that is a long continuous tone, which is a perfect part to sample. But also in the earlier exploration with when I used the clap sound, there were sort of constant parts. If you look at the waveform in Ableton, then there's this part here, which is fairly constant. And also later on when I use the FM sound of the drum root impact, you have parts like that sound like this. Which are kind of, in a way, kind of clean tones that you can easily loop into an instrument. So this is the first part of the exploration. Let's leave this for now and hook up the SP303 to the desk and try some of those delays. I have hooked up the SP303, so the drum root main output goes into the SP303, and I enabled the external in button, which means that if I press a sound on the drum root, you will hear it through the SP303 without the need that I first have to record something in the SP303, and I can just use the effects on the incoming sound and then I record that into Ableton. So I basically use the SP303 as a true effects box instead of a sampler. So the SP303 has many effects and it has even several delays. It has a pitch delay, regular delay, and a tape echo. And I'm going to use the tape echo. It's under the multi-effects number 2. And I'm going to play with the different settings to create wild tones. The thing is with this device is that you really have to watch your levels that you don't gonna clip into your sound card. So you have to adjust the master volume of the sampler. But let's try to create some wild tones and record them into Ableton. Those experiments were with the tape echo. Let's now try the regular delay of the SP303. So yeah, in the end I tried the pitch, but it's actually not a pitch delay. That does have a feedback control, but it doesn't self-oscillate, so it doesn't get out of control. So that one was actually not useful for this experiment. But we have the tape delay and the regular delay, or the tape echo and the regular echo. So now that we have done our experimentation and we have recorded several minutes of material into Ableton from the different hardware setups, I'm going into Ableton and to go through the files, the recordings, and see which parts are useful for creating a chromatic sampled instrument. What I would typically do is even use just loops and little bits of these recordings, but for now I leave that, maybe I do that later. And for now I just focus on finding something that has a sort of constant pitch that I can use as a source for my sampled instrument. So let's start in Ableton with the first recording from the Echostation. And as you can see from the waveform, there's something here and something over here. But let's first zoom into this part and let's see how that sounds. That sounds pretty decent. Let's copy that to a new track and put it into sampler. Let's put on the sustain mode add some crossfade and also put the release time on 500. So it's a B, so I'm going to put this on and add some detune. So this sounds pretty good. There's a bit of click at the beginning, so let's add some attack, 25 milliseconds. And then when you play it lower on the keyboard, it sounds especially good. And the nice thing is you can hear there's some noise in the sample because it's an analog delay emulation. So it adds some kind of noise into the signal, but that adds some character. I mean, it is a digital delay, so it can sound very clean, but since it's an emulation of an analog, it doesn't. So this is a fairly static sound. So let's add a little bit of reverb, of course. And also some autopan to create a bit of stereo movement. So this is the first instrument, and it's very good for drones and sort of ambient background noises. So you could just play one note and then maybe lower it much more in volume. And the cool thing is that this is created from a drum machine sound and this pedal. And that's basically what you're hearing. So it's really like, if you look at these two machines, then you wouldn't say that you can create this kind of sound from it. All right, so that's the first instrument. Let's go to the SP303 recording and see if we can get anything from there. So now for the SP303 sound, I'm thinking this part could work. Let's copy it and put it into sampler. So let's tune it to a C. So this is the original pitch, but when I play it higher, it doesn't sound good. When I play it lower, it sounds better. So it sounds like a pretty kind of obnoxious type of synth, but sometimes you need those too. So when you play it really low, you really hear the individual kind of repeats. So yeah, for the SP303 sounds, it's a bit more difficult to create a good instrument from it. This is what I came up with. It's nice that you hear that kind of the individual sounds, that it's not just a constant tone. Especially when you play it lower, it's kind of lo-fi and it sounds like it's distorted, that there's like a distortion effect on it, but it's just a distortion, the clipping, the internal clipping. So as always, what I would do now is save these instruments in an instrument rack and add it to my library of sounds. And in this way, I build up my own sound palette with sounds that I created with, in this case, hardware. So then whenever I want to create a track, I can go to my library and pull up instruments and sounds that I've created earlier, and then I'm ready to write music. If you're interested in sampled instruments, I have two sample libraries now over on Gumroad. They're both free. They're sampled instruments for Ableton Live, simpler and sampler instruments. So go check that out, link in the description. Let me know in the comments how you use effects to create sounds, how you use feedback on delays to create self-oscillating tones and other wild tones. As always, keep making music. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.